You need to apologize to me. You talked bad about me in front of your friends." My daughter shouted at the party in front of 40 people. I became a crazy person in front of my own family, and I stood up, my voice trembling. "Okay, honey, I'm sorry." My daughter smiled smugly while the whole room fell silent. She didn't know the danger that was coming. Right then, the doorbell rang and my lawyer walked in with a briefcase full of evidence. "Thank you so much for being here with me today. Before we continue, I'd really love to know, where are you watching from right now? Drop your city or country in the comments and say hello." I read every single one. Just a quick note before we go on, this story includes some fictionalized elements added for storytelling and educational reflection. Any resemblance to real people or places is coincidental, but the message behind it is meant to be meaningful and worth listening to. I'm Marianne Foster, and I'm 63 years old. On a Tuesday morning in January, my husband Thomas woke up, kissed me on the forehead, and told me he loved me. 90 minutes later, he was gone. It happened fast. One moment he was pouring coffee in our kitchen in Mount Pleasant, and the next he was on the floor clutching his chest. I called for help. The ambulance came. The doctors worked over him with machines and urgency. And then it was over. Thomas Foster, 65 years old, my husband of 37 years, was gone. His heart had given out. Sudden. Irreversible. I didn't cry right away. I think I was too shocked. I just stood there in that hospital room staring at the machines they were turning off one by one, and I thought, this can't be real. But it was. Our daughter Miranda arrived about an hour later. She rushed in, face pale, eyes wide. She wrapped her arms around me and held me tight. "I'm so sorry, Mom," she whispered. "I'm here. I've got you." And she did. At least that's what I thought. Miranda took charge immediately. She spoke to the doctors. She handled the paperwork. She drove me home and made me tea and sat with me while I tried to process what had just happened. I was grateful. "You don't have to thank me," she said. "You're my mom. I'm going to take care of you." The funeral was a week later. Miranda arranged everything, the service, the flowers, the reception. She picked out Thomas's suit. She wrote the obituary. She fielded calls from family and friends while I sat in the house we'd shared for 30 years, numb and exhausted. People kept telling me how lucky I was to have such a devoted daughter. I believed them, but then little things started to shift. During that first week, Miranda was at the house every single day. At first, I thought she was just being supportive, but I began to notice she wasn't just with me, she was going through things. She opened drawers. She looked through files in Thomas's office. She asked me questions about bank accounts, insurance policies, and the estate. "Mom, we need to get everything organized," she said one afternoon, standing in the doorway with a folder in her hands. "I don't want you to be overwhelmed." I wasn't overwhelmed. I'd been a professional accountant for 35 years before I retired. I knew exactly where everything was, but I was too tired to argue, so I just nodded. After the funeral, things got more intense. Miranda suggested gently, carefully, that maybe I shouldn't be living alone. "It's a big house, Mom, and you've just been through a trauma. What if something happens and no one's here?" I told her I was fine. She didn't push, not directly, but she started showing up every day anyway, sometimes twice a day. She'd bring groceries I didn't ask for. She'd reorganize the kitchen. She'd sit with me and talk about plans and next steps. One evening, about 5 weeks after Thomas passed, she asked me point blank, "Mom, have you thought about signing a power of attorney just in case, so I can help manage things if you ever need me to?" I looked at her carefully. "Miranda, I don't need help managing things. I'm 63, not 93. She smiled, but it didn't reach her eyes. "I know, Mom. I just worry about you." I didn't sign anything. By the 6th week, I'd started to feel uneasy. Not because of anything specific, just a gnawing sense that something wasn't right. Miranda was being too helpful, too involved, too insistent. And then one afternoon in mid-February, I heard her on the phone. I wasn't trying to eavesdrop. I was in the kitchen making tea when she stepped out onto the back porch, phone pressed to her ear. The window was open just a crack, and her voice carried. What I heard made my blood run cold. Her voice was different on the phone, sharper, more businesslike. Nothing like the soft, concerned tone she'd been using with me for the past 6 weeks. I was standing at the kitchen counter waiting for the kettle to boil when I noticed she'd stepped outside. The back door was slightly ajar and her words floated in through the screen. At first I wasn't paying attention, but then I heard a phrase that made me freeze. "We need to move faster on the conservatorship." I set down my cup. Quietly, I moved closer to the door. "No, she doesn't suspect anything," Miranda continued. "She's grieving. She's not thinking clearly. That's the whole point." My heart started pounding. The estate is worth $780,000. The house alone is almost $500,000. I'm not waiting around while she paused, listening. Then, "Look, she's at the age where memory issues happen. It's not a stretch. We just need the right documentation." I pressed my hand against the counter to steady myself. "She can't manage this kind of money," Miranda said flatly. "She's 63. She just lost her husband. She's vulnerable. A judge will see that. I need decision-making authority before she does something reckless." The kettle started to whistle. I didn't move. Miranda's voice dropped lower. "I already have someone who can provide a medical assessment. It'll say what we need it to say. Once we file, it'll be fast. She won't even know what's happening until it's done." I felt like I'd been punched in the chest. This wasn't concern. This wasn't love. This was a plan. A calculated, cold-blooded plan to take control of everything Thomas and I had built together, and she thought I was too weak to stop her. I heard her footsteps on the porch. She was wrapping up the call. I turned off the stove, grabbed my cup, and walked back to the table as if nothing had happened. When Miranda came back inside, she was smiling. That same warm, gentle smile. "Sorry, Mom, just had to take that call. Work stuff." I looked up at her and smiled back. "No problem, sweetheart." She sat down across from me. "How are you feeling today? You seem a little tired." "I'm fine," I said evenly. "Just the usual." She reached across the table and squeezed my hand. "You know you can tell me if you're struggling, right? I'm here for you." I nodded. "I know, honey, thank you." She stayed for another hour, organizing a few things, asking if I needed anything. The whole time I kept my face calm. I laughed when I was supposed to. I agreed when she suggested I should rest more. But inside I was screaming. When she finally left, I walked her to the door. I hugged her. I told her I loved her. I waved as she drove away. And then I closed the door, locked it, and stood there in the hallway for a full minute shaking. My daughter, my own daughter, was trying to have me declared incompetent. She was going to take my home, my money, my freedom. She was going to put me in front of a judge and tell the world I couldn't take care of myself. And she thought I'd never find out. I walked into Thomas's office and sat down at his desk. I opened the laptop, the one I'd barely touched since he'd passed, and I pulled up a blank document. At the top, I typed timeline. Then I started writing. Everything. The dates Miranda had started asking about finances, the questions about power of attorney, the way she'd been going through Thomas's files, and now the phone call, word for word as much as I could remember. I wasn't going to confront her. Not yet. I was 63 years old and I'd spent 35 years as a professional accountant. I knew how to build a case. I knew how to document everything. And if my own daughter thought she could manipulate me, she was about to learn she'd made a very big mistake. Over the next 2 weeks, I became a detective in my own home. I'd spent 35 years as an accountant. I knew how to follow a paper trail. I knew how to find inconsistencies. And I knew how to stay calm while doing it. Miranda kept coming by, still playing the role of the concerned daughter. But now I was watching her differently. Every drawer she opened, every file she touched, every question she asked, I was cataloging it all. And then one afternoon in late February, I found what I was looking for. She'd left her bag on the kitchen counter while she went upstairs to check the smoke detectors. I don't know if it was carelessness or arrogance, but she'd left the zipper open. I glanced toward the stairs. I could hear her moving around on the second floor. I reached into the bag. There, tucked into a folder, was a stack of papers. The top page had a header in bold letters, "Petition for appointment of conservator." My hands were shaking as I pulled it out. The document was dated 4 weeks after Thomas's passing. 4 weeks. She'd started this process almost immediately. The petition named me as the proposed conservatee and listed my age, my address, and a series of allegations: inability to manage financial affairs, declining cognitive function, recent significant loss affecting judgment. At the bottom was a lawyer's signature. Someone I'd never heard of. I pulled out my phone and started taking pictures. Every page, every line. Then I found the second document. It was a medical report, signed by someone named Dr. Helen Patterson. The letterhead said she was affiliated with a family practice clinic in Charleston. I'd never met a Dr. Helen Patterson in my life. The report claimed I'd been evaluated 2 weeks prior. It listed symptoms, memory lapses, confusion regarding financial matters, difficulty with decision-making. The conclusion was clear. I was experiencing cognitive decline and required legal oversight to protect assets and ensure appropriate care. I took pictures of that too. My daughter had fabricated a medical evaluation. She'd found someone willing to put their name on a lie. I heard her footsteps on the stairs. I slipped the papers back into the folder, zipped the bag, and stepped away from the counter. "Everything okay down here, Mom?" she called as she came into the kitchen. I smiled. "Just fine, honey." She picked up her bag and slung it over her shoulder. "I'm going to head out. Do you need anything before I go?" "No, I'm all set. Thank you for checking the detectors." She hugged me. "Of course. I'll see you tomorrow." I waved as she left. Then I went straight back to Thomas's office. I opened the financial files I'd been avoiding for weeks. I needed to know exactly what Miranda was after. The numbers were clear. The house in Mount Pleasant was worth about $480,000. We had $180,000 in savings. Thomas's life insurance had paid out $120,000. Total $780,000. That's what this was about. That's what she wanted. And she'd already taken the next step. I found an email in Thomas's account one Miranda must have sent from his computer, inquiring with a real estate agent about preparing the property for a potential sale. She was planning to sell my home out from under me. I sat back in the chair and stared at the screen. I couldn't do this alone. I needed help, legal help, and I needed proof that I was perfectly capable of managing my own life. I thought about Thomas's old colleague, a lawyer he'd worked with for years on estate planning, a man I trusted. On a Tuesday morning in early March, I picked up the phone and called Andrew Donovan. His office was in downtown Charleston, tucked into a historic building with tall windows and worn wooden floors. When I walked in that Tuesday afternoon, Andrew Donovan stood up from behind his desk and shook my hand with the kind of firm grip that told me he remembered Thomas well. "Mrs. Foster," he said, "I'm so sorry for your loss. Thomas was a good man." "Thank you," I said, "and thank you for seeing me on short notice." He gestured to the chair across from him. "You said on the phone this was urgent. What's going on?" I set my 3-ring binder on his desk and opened it. 4 tabs, clearly labeled, timeline, petition, notes, questions. Andrew's eyebrows went up. "You don't look like someone who needs a conservator," he said slowly. "That's because I don't," I replied. I walked him through everything. The phone call I'd overheard, the petition I'd found in Miranda's bag, the fabricated medical report from a doctor I'd never met, the real estate inquiry about selling my home. Andrew listened without interrupting. When I finished, he leaned back in his chair and let out a long breath. "Your daughter is a lawyer, correct?" "Yes. And she's attempting to have you declared legally incompetent so she can control an estate worth $780,000. "That's correct." He tapped his pen against the desk. "South Carolina law allows for conservatorship if there's credible medical evidence and family testimony that the individual cannot manage their own affairs. What your daughter is doing if she's fabricating that evidence is illegal, but we need to prove it." "That's why I'm here," I said. Andrew nodded. "Here's what we're going to do. 3 steps. First, we need a legitimate medical evaluation from a reputable hospital, something that will hold up in court. I'm thinking MUSC, Medical University of South Carolina. They have an excellent neurology department." "I'm ready," I said. "Second," he continued, "we need documentation of Miranda's intentions. In South Carolina, we have one-party consent laws for recording conversations. That means you can legally record any conversation you're part of without telling the other person. If you can get her on tape discussing this plan, that's evidence." I pulled out my phone and held it up. "I can do that." And third, Andrew said, "We need to investigate this Dr. Helen Patterson. If she's falsifying medical reports, we need to know who she is and why she's involved. I'm going to bring in a private investigator, someone I've worked with before. His name is Robert Miller, retired police detective. Very thorough. Do it I said. Andrew smiled for the first time since I'd walked in. Mrs. Foster, I have to say you're more prepared than most of my clients. 35 years as an accountant. 35 years, I confirmed. It shows. 2 weeks later, I was sitting in an examination room at MUSC going through a battery of cognitive tests with Dr. Patricia Hendricks, a neurologist with 20 years of experience. She asked me to remember lists of words, to draw shapes from memory, to solve problems and answer questions about dates and current events. I took my time. I stayed calm. I answered everything. When the results came back, Dr. Hendricks sat down across from me and smiled. Mrs. Foster, your Mosier score is 28 out of 30. That's well within normal range for your age. Your memory recall is in the 95th percentile. Your executive function, your ability to plan, organize, and make decisions is excellent. She handed me a printed report signed and stamped with the hospital seal. You are cognitively sound, she said firmly. There is no medical basis for conservatorship. I took the report and held it like it was made of gold. Thank you, doctor. Back at Andrew's office, I handed him the report. He read it carefully, then looked up at me. This is solid, he said. But we're not done. We still need the recordings. And Robert is working on the Helen Patterson investigation. But you've got the foundation now. You've got proof. I nodded. Now I needed to record Miranda. The device was smaller than I expected. A little black rectangle that fit in my palm. Andrew had walked me through how to use it. Press the button, let it run, save the file. Simple. Legal, necessary. But that didn't mean it felt right. I sat in my kitchen on a Wednesday afternoon in early May holding that recorder, and I felt sick. I was about to record my own daughter, but I pressed the button anyway. The first recording happened on a Thursday evening. Miranda brought takeout and we sat at the kitchen table. Mom, we need to get your finances organized, she said. It's been almost 4 months since Dad passed. I think you should sign a power of attorney, just temporarily. I don't need help managing things, Miranda. Her jaw tightened. You're not thinking clearly. You're emotional. You're not in a position to make major financial decisions. I'm 63, not 93, and I was a professional accountant for 35 years. She grabbed her bag and walked to the door. Fine, but don't come crying to me when you're in over your head. She left without saying goodbye. 3 weeks later, she came back with someone, a woman in a sharp blazer. Mom, this is Lauren Matthews. She's a financial consultant. Lauren sat down with a folder full of charts. She talked about downsizing and liquidity. Then she said, Mrs. Foster, have you considered selling the house? I looked at Miranda. Why would I sell my house? You don't need a place this big. You're here alone. You could move somewhere smaller, easier to manage. Like where? She hesitated. Like a retirement community or assisted living. You want to put me in a nursing home? That's not what I said. I just think you'd be happier somewhere with less responsibility. I looked at Lauren. You can leave now. After they left, I listened to the recording 3 times. The third conversation happened in late June after dinner. Miranda had been quiet, working up to something. Mom, can I ask about Dad's life insurance? How much was the payout? Why do you want to know? I think we should make sure it's being managed properly. That's a lot of money. It's being managed fine. Her expression hardened. You're getting older. I've noticed you've been forgetting things. I'm worried. I haven't forgotten anything. You forgot Aunt Margaret's birthday. I sent her a card 2 days late because I was busy. Miranda leaned back. You're 63. You just lost your husband. You're alone in this house trying to manage almost $800,000. Do you really think that's wise? I looked at her. She wasn't worried about me. She was worried about the money. This conversation is over, I said. She left without another word. By the end of June, I had 3 recordings, 3 pieces of evidence showing what Miranda wanted and how far she was willing to go. But I needed more. I needed to know about Helen Patterson, the doctor whose signature was on that fake medical report. Andrew had hired Robert Miller to investigate. On the last Friday in June, Andrew called. Robert finished his report. You need to come to the office. I drove to downtown Charleston the next morning. Robert was there, a lean man in his 60s with sharp eyes. He slid a folder across the desk. She's not a doctor, Robert said. She's a registered nurse. works at a clinic in North Charleston, and she's been friends with your daughter since college. Inside the folder were screenshots, employment records, and a photo of Helen and Miranda at a birthday party. Your daughter hired her friend to write a fake medical evaluation, Andrew said quietly. That's fraud. I closed the folder. What do we do now? Andrew leaned forward. We wait, and if Miranda brings Helen to your house again, we record it. She came on a Monday afternoon in early July. Miranda showed up at my door with a woman I'd never seen before, mid-30s, wearing a white blouse and carrying a clipboard. Mom, this is Dr. Helen Patterson, Miranda said brightly. She's a family practice physician. I asked her to stop by and do a quick health check. Helen smiled and extended her hand. Mrs. Foster, it's nice to meet you. I shook her hand and let them in. The recorder in my pocket was already running. We sat in the living room. Helen pulled out a pen and started asking questions. Can you tell me your full name and date of birth? Marianne Louise Foster, March 14th, 1963. And who's the current president? I answered correctly. She asked me what year it was. What day of the week? She had me count backward from 100 by sevens. She wrote everything down but didn't take my blood pressure, didn't check my reflexes, didn't do any actual medical examination. After about 10 minutes, I asked, which hospital do you work at, Dr. E? She glanced at Miranda. Roper Hospital. Which location? The main campus, downtown. I nodded and smiled. After they left, I went straight to the South Carolina Board of Medical Examiners website. I searched for Helen Patterson, physician, family practice. Nothing. I called Andrew. She's not a doctor, I said. I know. Robert confirmed it this morning. Helen Patterson is a registered nurse, works at a clinic in North Charleston, and she's been friends with Miranda since college. I sat back. So my daughter hired her friend to pretend to be a doctor. Exactly, and if she comes back, let her. Keep recording. 4 days later, on Thursday evening, Miranda brought Helen back. Mom, Dr. Patterson wanted to do a follow-up. I smiled and welcomed them in. The recorder was on. Helen asked the same questions, same tests. At the end, she wrote something down and handed it to Miranda. I think conservatorship is the appropriate course of action, Helen said. Your mother is showing signs of cognitive decline. I didn't react. I just thanked her and walked them to the door. I'm a little tired. I think I'll head upstairs early tonight. Of course, Mom. You rest. But I didn't go upstairs. I stayed in the kitchen out of sight with the recorder still running. They thought I'd gone to bed. I heard them talking near the front door. Are you sure this will hold up? Miranda asked. It'll be fine. I've written it as a clinical observation. No one's going to question it. We need to file before October. If we wait too long, she might start asking questions. Helen laughed. She won't. She's too trusting. And even if she did, who's going to believe a 63-year-old widow over a licensed attorney and a medical professional? Exactly, Miranda said. This money should have been mine to begin with. They left a minute later. I stood in the kitchen staring at the recorder. I had it, all of it, 4 recordings. Miranda's voice talking about conservatorship selling my house, putting me away. And I had proof Helen Patterson wasn't a doctor, that the medical evaluation was completely fabricated. I called Andrew the next morning. I have the recording. Good. Bring everything to my office. We need to secure it all. When I arrived downtown, Andrew and Robert were waiting. They listened to all 4 recordings. When it was done, Andrew looked up. This is everything we need. Medical evaluation from MUSC, proof of fraud, recordings showing intent. But there's one more thing. He pulled out a sealed envelope with my name on it. I found this in Thomas's estate files yesterday. He left instructions that it should only be opened if someone challenged your capacity. I stared at the envelope. Thomas's handwriting. 2 weeks later, on a quiet Tuesday morning in late July, I sat in Andrew's office and opened it. The letter was dated December 5th, 3 months before Thomas passed away. I recognized his handwriting immediately, steady, precise. My hands were shaking as I unfolded it. My dearest Marianne, if you're reading this, it means someone has tried to challenge your capacity to manage your own life. I'm writing this now because I need you to know something. I see what's happening. I see the way Miranda looks at our estate. I see the way she talks about money, and I'm worried. I love our daughter, but I also know she has ambitions that sometimes cloud her judgment. I don't want her to take advantage of you when I'm gone, so I've done something to protect you. Attached to this letter is a codicil to my will. It's legal. It's binding. And it says that if anyone, including Miranda, tries to have you declared incompetent without legitimate medical evidence from an independent physician, they will be disinherited. They'll receive $1 and nothing more. I hope you never have to use this. I hope Miranda proves me wrong. But if she doesn't, I need you to know that I'm standing beside you, even when I'm not there anymore. You are the strongest, smartest woman I've ever known. Don't let anyone tell you otherwise. All my love, Thomas. I had to set the letter down. My vision was blurring. I pressed my hand to my mouth and tried not to cry in front of Andrew. He waited quietly. Then he slid the codicil across the desk. It was a single page typed and notarized. 2 witnesses had signed it. I recognized one of the names, Frank Coleman Thomas's old law partner. The language was formal, but the meaning was clear. If any beneficiary attempted to challenge my legal capacity without credible independent medical documentation, that person would be immediately disinherited and removed from the will. They would receive $1. Andrew leaned forward. This was signed and notarized on December 5th of last year, 3 months before Thomas passed. It's completely legal. So, if Miranda files for conservatorship, she loses everything, Andrew said. The house, the savings, the life insurance. She gets $1. I stared at the document. Thomas had known. He'd seen what I was only starting to see, and he'd protected me. Why didn't he tell me? Because he hoped he was wrong. He hoped Miranda would never do this, but he wanted you safe if she did. I folded the letter carefully. Then I looked up at Andrew. What do we do now? Now we wait. Miranda is going to move forward with her plan, and when she does, we're going to be ready. He gestured to the files on his desk, my medical evaluation, the recordings, the report on Helen Patterson, and now the codicil. You have everything you need, Marianne. Medical proof that you're competent, evidence that she fabricated a doctor's report, recordings of her admitting her intentions, and a legal document that protects you. So what's the next step? We let her make her move. She's going to want witnesses, family members who can testify that you're declining. She'll call a meeting probably at your house, and she'll try to humiliate you in front of everyone. I felt my jaw tighten, and then we walk in with all of this. Andrew tapped the files, and we show everyone the truth. I took a deep breath when, soon, she's been pushing this timeline. My guess, within the next month. He was right. 3 weeks later, in early September, Miranda called me. Mom, I think we need to have a family meeting, just to talk about everything. I've invited some relatives over on September 20th. I hope you'll be there. I smiled into the phone. Of course, honey, I'll be there. When I hung up, I called Andrew. It's happening, September 20th. Good, he said. Then that's when we end this. If you're still here with me, drop any number from 1 to 7 in the comments so I know you're still watching. And if this were you knowing the truth, holding the evidence, but the person standing in front of you is your own child, would you stay silent to keep the family together? Or would you stand up and expose everything no matter the cost? And just a quick note before we continue, the next part of this story includes some dramatized elements added for storytelling and perspective. If that's not something you're comfortable with, you're free to stop watching here. They started arriving around 2 in the afternoon. I stood by the front window and watched them pull into the driveway one by one. Cousins I hadn't seen in years, friends of Thomas's from work, a few faces I didn't even recognize. 40 people. Miranda had invited 40 people to my house. Dorothy arrived early and came straight to me. Marianne, what's going on? Miranda called and said this was urgent. I squeezed her hand. Just stay close to me, okay? Margaret showed up a few minutes later with Frank Coleman. They both looked concerned. Do you know what this is about? Margaret asked quietly. I nodded. I do. Just trust me. By 2:30, the living room was full. People were standing along the walls. Some sat on the couch. Others pulled in chairs from the dining room. The air felt heavy. Miranda stood at the front of the room with a folder in her hands. She looked calm, confident. She thought she'd already won. Thank you all for coming, she began. I know this was short notice, but we have a serious issue we need to address as a family. She paused and looked at me. I was sitting in the armchair near the fireplace. Dorothy was on one side of me, Margaret on the other. My mother is sick, Miranda said. She's been struggling since Dad passed away. Memory issues, confusion. She can't manage her finances anymore. And I'm worried someone is going to take advantage of her. A few people murmured. Someone in the back said, "Oh no." Miranda opened the folder and started passing out papers. I had a doctor evaluate her, Dr. Helen Patterson. She's a family practice physician, and she confirmed what I've been seeing. Mom is experiencing cognitive decline. I watched the papers move through the room. I recognized the fake report, the conservatorship petition, the list of assets, $780,000. Someone near the couch gasped, "That's a lot of money." "Exactly," Miranda said. "And right now, Mom is trying to manage all of it by herself. It's not safe. That's why I filed for conservatorship. I need legal authority to protect her before something terrible happens." Dorothy's hand tightened on mine. Miranda looked around the room. "I know this is hard to hear, but it's the truth. Mom isn't herself anymore. She's even been saying hurtful things about me to her friends." She turned and looked directly at me. "Mom, you told Dorothy I was trying to steal from you. You said terrible things about me, and I think you need to apologize right now in front of everyone." The room went silent. I felt every pair of eyes on me. I took a slow breath. Then I looked at Dorothy, and I said very calmly, "Okay, honey, I'm sorry, Dorothy." Dorothy's head snapped toward me. "Marianne, what are you talking about? You never said anything like that to me." Miranda's smile faltered. "Dorothy, I know this is uncomfortable, but..." "No." Dorothy stood up. "I've been friends with Marianne for over 40 years. She has never said a bad word about you. Not once." Miranda's face flushed. "You don't understand. She's confused. She doesn't remember." "I remember everything," I said quietly. Miranda turned to me, her expression hardening. "Mom, you're not thinking clearly. That's exactly why we're doing this. You can't even control your emotions anymore." She turned back to the room. "This is what I'm talking about. She's declining, and I need your support. I'm filing this petition with the court next week. Mom needs to be protected from herself." The room was silent again. A few people nodded. Others looked uncomfortable. Miranda folded her arms and looked at me like she'd just won. And then the doorbell rang. I stood up slowly. Every eye in the room followed me. I walked to the door and opened it. Andrew Donovan stood on the porch, briefcase in hand. I smiled and stepped aside. "Come in, Andrew." I turned back to the room full of people. "Everyone, this is Andrew Donovan. He's my lawyer." Miranda's face went pale. Andrew stepped into the living room, briefcase in hand, and nodded politely. "Good afternoon. My name is Andrew Donovan, and I represent Mrs. Marianne Foster." The room was silent. 40 pairs of eyes moved between Andrew, Miranda, and me. Miranda forced a smile. "Mom, I don't understand. Why would you need a lawyer? I'm just trying to help you." I stood up slowly. Dorothy and Margaret moved aside to give me space. "Miranda," I said clearly, "you've tried very hard, but I don't need your help." I turned to face the room. "Everyone, my daughter, just told you I'm losing my mind, that I can't manage my own life. But the truth is, I'm perfectly capable, and I can prove it." Andrew set his briefcase on the coffee table and opened it. He pulled out a folder. "This is a neuropsychological evaluation from the Medical University of South Carolina. Mrs. Foster was evaluated by Dr. Patricia Hendricks, a board-certified neurologist." He read aloud. "MoCA cognitive assessment 28 out of 30. Memory recall 95th percentile. Executive function excellent." He looked around the room. "Mrs. Foster is cognitively sound. There is no medical basis for conservatorship." A murmur ran through the crowd. People glanced at Miranda. Miranda's smile was gone. "That's just one doctor's opinion. I had Dr. Patterson evaluate her, and she came to a different conclusion." Andrew nodded. "Yes, Dr. Helen Patterson. Let's talk about her." He pulled out another document. "I hired a private investigator, and here's what we found." He held up a printed page with a photograph. "This is Helen Patterson. She is not a physician. She's a registered nurse. She works at a walk-in clinic in North Charleston, and she's been friends with Miranda Foster since college." The murmur grew louder. Andrew continued. "Dr. Patterson has no medical degree, no license to practice as a physician. The evaluation she provided was fraudulent, and Miranda knew it." Miranda's face flushed. That's not true. Helen is a medical professional. She was helping because she was concerned. She's a nurse pretending to be a doctor, I said flatly, and you paid her to write a fake report. Miranda turned to me. Mom, you're confused. You don't understand what's happening. I understand perfectly. You want $780,000. You want my house, and you were willing to lie to get it. Dorothy stood up. Marianne is right. She's been clear this entire time, and I never heard her say a bad word about you, Miranda. Margaret stood too. Neither did I. Frank Coleman stood in the back. Miranda, I've known your mother for 30 years. She's one of the sharpest people I've ever met. This is shameful. Miranda looked around. Her support was crumbling. I was trying to protect her. Helen made a mistake, but that doesn't mean Mom doesn't need help. I don't need protection, I said. I need my daughter to stop trying to steal from me. The room went silent. Andrew stepped forward. Let me be clear. What Miranda has done is illegal. She fabricated medical evidence. She attempted to have her mother declared incompetent under false pretenses, and she tried to seize control of an estate worth $780,000. He looked at Miranda. If you file that conservatorship petition, I will file a counter motion, and I will present all of this evidence in court. You will lose, and you may face criminal charges. Miranda's hands were shaking. This is insane. No, I said. We're holding you accountable. Andrew reached into his briefcase again. He pulled out a small recording device and held it up. And there's one more thing. He looked at me. I nodded. Andrew set the recorder on the table. Mrs. Foster has been documenting this for months. We have 4 recordings. Conversations where Miranda discussed her plans, where she talked about selling Mrs. Foster's house, where she admitted what she was really after. He pressed play. Andrew reached into his briefcase and pulled out a small black recorder. He held it up so everyone could see. This device, he said, contains 4 recordings, all legally obtained under South Carolina's one-party consent law, all recorded by Mrs. Foster herself. He pressed a button. There was a faint click, then the hiss of static. Then Miranda's voice, slightly distorted but unmistakable, filled the room. Recording 1. Static crackle, February voice. We need to move faster on the conservatorship. The estate is worth $780,000. I'm not waiting around while she... The recording was clear. Too clear. Every word carried across the silent living room. I watched Miranda's face go from pale to bright red. Andrew let it play for another 30 seconds. Then he pressed stop. The static cut off abruptly. That was recorded in February, Andrew said. 6 weeks after Mr. Foster passed away. Miranda was already planning this. He pressed play again. Another click. Another hiss of tape. Recording 2. Echo effect, muffled background noise. This time, it was Miranda with another woman, Lauren Matthews, the financial consultant. Your mother doesn't need a house this big. If we sold, she could move somewhere smaller, easier to manage. My voice came through faintly as if from another room. Like where? Miranda's voice louder now. Like a retirement community or assisted living. Andrew stopped the recording. Mrs. Foster was being pressured to sell her home, not because she needed to, because Miranda wanted the money. A woman near the window shook her head. Andrew played the 3rd recording. The static returned, then faded into Miranda's voice. Recording 3. Tape hum, slightly warped sound. Mom, can I ask about Dad's life insurance? How much was the payout? Then Miranda again, her tone sharper. You're getting older. I've noticed you've been forgetting things. I'm worried. My voice firm and clear. I haven't forgotten anything. Miranda, you're 63. You just lost your husband. You're trying to manage almost $800,000. Do you really think that's wise? Andrew stopped it. Miranda was building a narrative, setting the stage for conservatorship. I looked around the room. People weren't just uncomfortable. They were angry. Andrew held up the recorder one more time. This is the most important one, recorded 2 weeks ago, after Miranda brought Helen Patterson to Mrs. Foster's house for a second time. He pressed play. The static was louder this time, longer before the voices broke through. Recording 4 low-quality voices in the dark. Miranda and Helen talking. They thought I'd gone to bed. Are you sure this will hold up? Miranda asked. It'll be fine. I've written it as a clinical observation. No one's going to question it. We need to file before October. If we wait too long, she might start asking questions. Helen laughed a cold, sharp sound through the speaker. She won't. She's too trusting. And even if she did, who's going to believe a 63-year-old widow over a licensed attorney and a medical professional? Miranda's voice came through clearly, confidently. Exactly. This money should have been mine to begin with. Andrew turned off the recorder. The static disappeared. The room stayed silent. Then Dorothy stood up. Her face was flushed. Miranda, what have you done? That's your mother. Margaret stood next. Thomas would be ashamed of you. One of Thomas's cousins stood in the back. You were going to sell her house, put her in a home for money. Miranda's voice cracked. You don't understand. I was trying to protect her. I don't need protection, I said quietly. Everyone turned to look at me. I stood and walked to the center of the room. I looked directly at Miranda. I don't need help. I don't need conservatorship, but you need $780,000, and you were willing to destroy me to get it. Miranda opened her mouth, but nothing came out. Andrew stepped forward. There's one more thing. Miranda's face went white. Andrew held the codicil up for everyone to see. Then he read aloud slowly and clearly. If any beneficiary of this estate attempts to challenge the legal capacity of my wife, Marianne Foster, without credible and independent medical documentation from a licensed physician, that beneficiary shall be disinherited from this will and shall receive the sum of $1 and no further inheritance. He lowered the document and looked at Miranda. This codicil was signed and notarized on December 5th of last year, 3 months before your father passed away. 2 witnesses signed it. One of them is in this room. Frank Coleman raised his hand from the back. I was there. Thomas asked me to witness it. He told me he hoped he'd never need it, but he wanted Marianne protected. Andrew continued. This document is legally binding, and Miranda, you've already violated it. You attempted to have your mother declared incompetent using fabricated medical evidence. Under the terms of this codicil, you are now disinherited. Miranda's voice was barely a whisper. No, he couldn't do that. He wouldn't. He did, I said, because he knew. Miranda turned to me, her eyes wide. Mom, please, this is insane. Dad didn't mean... He meant every word I said. Thomas knew you had ambitions. He knew you looked at our estate and saw dollar signs. He loved you, but he also loved me, and he wanted to make sure I'd be safe. I stepped closer to her, and now I have the law on my side. I have your father's wishes, and I have the truth. Miranda's voice rose. I was trying to help you. Everything I did was to protect you. Dorothy stood up again. No, Miranda. Everything you did was to protect yourself. Margaret nodded. You hired a fake doctor. You tried to take your mother's home. You planned to put her in a facility so she couldn't stop you. Miranda looked around the room, desperate. You're all turning on me because of some paperwork. Because Mom hired a lawyer, Frank Coleman stepped forward. We're holding you accountable because you tried to steal from your own mother, and you used the law to do it. Andrew's voice was calm but firm. Miranda, if you file that conservatorship petition, I will submit all of this evidence to the court. The fake medical report, the recordings, the codicil. You will lose, and depending on how the court views your actions, you could face criminal charges for fraud and elder abuse. Miranda's hands were shaking. She looked at me, her voice breaking. Mom, please, you can't do this to me. You need me. I took a breath. I looked her in the eyes. No, sweetheart, I don't need you, but you needed my money. The room was silent. Miranda's face crumpled. I'm your daughter. Yes, I said quietly. You are. And that's the only reason I'm giving you a choice. Andrew stepped beside me. Mrs. Foster has authorized me to offer you an option. You can withdraw the conservatorship petition right now. You can apologize to everyone in this room. And you can walk away with your inheritance intact, minus any legal fees we've incurred. He paused. Or you can proceed, and you'll get $1, nothing more. Miranda stared at me. You'd really do that? You'd really cut me off? I would, I said, because what you tried to do to me wasn't love. It wasn't protection. It was theft. I glanced at Andrew. He pulled a single sheet of paper from his briefcase and set it on the coffee table. "This is a withdrawal form," Andrew said. "Sign it, apologize, and leave." Miranda looked at the paper, then at me, then at the 40 people watching her. She didn't move. I took a deep breath. Something in my eyes changed, and I made my decision. I stood up. The room went silent. I walked to the center and looked at my daughter. 40 people watched us, waiting. "Miranda," I said, my voice steady, "you have two choices." She stared at me. "Choice one, you withdraw that conservatorship petition right now. You apologize to me in front of everyone here, and you leave." I paused. "Choice two, I let Andrew file a lawsuit against you for elder abuse fraud and attempted theft, and I ask the court to enforce the codicil, which means you get $1, nothing more." Miranda's eyes filled with tears. "Mom, you can't." "I can, and I will." I stepped closer. "You tried to steal my freedom. You tried to convince everyone I was incompetent. You hired a fake doctor. You planned to sell my home. You talked about putting me in a facility." My voice didn't waver. "You're not my daughter anymore. You're just someone who wanted my money." Miranda's face crumpled. "I was trying to help you." "No, you were trying to help yourself." Dorothy stepped beside me and put her hand on my shoulder. Margaret came to my other side. Frank Coleman spoke from the back. "Marianne's right, Miranda. You need to take responsibility." The room stayed quiet. Everyone was looking at Miranda, waiting for her answer. She looked around, at Dorothy, at Margaret, at Frank, at the cousins and friends who'd watched her try to destroy me. No one stood with her. Finally, she whispered, "I'm sorry." But her voice was hollow. There was no sincerity, just defeat. I shook my head. Sorry isn't enough. I turned to Andrew. "Do you have the withdrawal form?" Andrew pulled a sheet of paper from his briefcase and set it on the coffee table. "Right here." I looked at Miranda. "Sign it." She hesitated. "Mom, please. If I sign that, I lose everything. If you don't sign it, you lose more." Miranda stared at the paper. Her hands were shaking. Then slowly she picked up the pen and signed her name. Andrew took the form and folded it into his briefcase. "I'll file this with the court tomorrow." I looked at Miranda one last time. "Now get out of my house." She stood there for a moment like she couldn't believe what was happening. "Mom, leave, and don't contact me again until you understand what you did wrong." Miranda's face twisted. For a second, I thought she was going to cry, but she didn't. She just grabbed her purse and walked to the front door. She didn't look back. She didn't say another word. The door closed behind her, and then the room erupted. Dorothy hugged me. Margaret was crying. Frank shook Andrew's hand. People were patting me on the back, telling me how brave I was, how strong, how proud Thomas would be. But I didn't feel brave. I didn't feel strong. I just felt tired. I sank into the armchair by the fireplace and closed my eyes. Dorothy sat on the arm of the chair and squeezed my hand. "You did the right thing," she said softly. I nodded, but I wasn't sure. I'd just forced my own daughter out of my house. I'd threatened to disinherit her. I'd exposed her lies in front of 40 people. It was the right thing. I knew that. But it didn't feel good. Andrew knelt beside the chair. "Are you okay?" I opened my eyes. "I will be." He nodded. "You're safe now. The petition is withdrawn. The estate is secure. Miranda can't touch you." I took a deep breath. "Thank you, Andrew." He smiled. "You did this, not me." People started leaving after that. They hugged me. They told me to call if I needed anything. And slowly the house emptied. By 5 o'clock, it was just me, Dorothy, and Margaret sitting in the living room. The house was quiet again, but this time it felt different. It felt like mine. An hour later, the house was quiet. Dorothy and Margaret had stayed behind. They were in the kitchen cleaning up. I could hear them talking softly, water running in the sink. I sat in the armchair by the fireplace staring at nothing. Andrew pulled a chair over and sat across from me. "How are you holding up?" I looked at him. "I don't know yet." He nodded. "That's fair. But there are a few things we need to take care of. Legal things. Just to make sure this is really over." I straightened up. "What do you need me to do?" Miranda withdrew the petition. "But we need to make sure she can't file it again. I'm going to send copies of everything, the codicil, the recordings, the evidence about Helen Patterson to the Public Guardian's office and the South Carolina Bar Association. What will that do? It creates a record. If Miranda ever tries to file for conservatorship again, the court will see that she's already attempted it using fraudulent evidence. And the Bar Association will investigate her conduct. She could face disciplinary action. I nodded slowly. Good. Andrew leaned forward. I also want you to think about updating your will and changing the beneficiaries on your financial accounts, just to be safe. You think she'll try something else? I don't know, but I'd rather be prepared. I sighed. Okay, I'll do it. Dorothy came in from the kitchen with a cup of tea and set it beside me. She sat on the arm of the chair. You did the right thing, Marianne, she said quietly. I looked up at her. Did I? Yes, Thomas would be so proud of you. Margaret came in and sat on the couch. You're stronger than I ever gave you credit for. If it were my daughter, I don't know if I could have done what you just did. I shook my head. I didn't want to do it, but I couldn't let her take my freedom. I'm 63 years old, not 93, and I'm not going to let anyone decide how I live my life. Dorothy squeezed my shoulder. That's exactly right. We sat in silence for a while. Andrew made notes. Margaret poured tea. Dorothy stayed beside me. Eventually, Andrew stood up. I'll get started on the filings Monday morning, and I'll call you next week to schedule a time to update your will. Thank you, Andrew, for everything. He smiled. You did the hard part. I just helped with the paperwork. After he left Dorothy and Margaret stayed for another hour, we didn't talk much. We just sat together. And that was enough. When they finally left, I walked them to the door and hugged them both. Call us if you need anything, Dorothy said. Anytime. I will. I closed the door and stood in the hallway for a minute. The house felt different now, lighter somehow, but also emptier. I walked back into the living room and looked around. At the couch where Miranda had sat, at the coffee table where Andrew had laid out all the evidence, at the 40 chairs we'd pulled in from the dining room. This was my house, my life, my freedom, and I'd fought for it. A few days later, I went back to Andrew's office to sign the updated documents. New beneficiaries, new will, everything secure. On my way out, I checked my phone. There was an email from an address I didn't recognize. I opened it. It was from Helen Patterson. Mrs. Foster, I'm writing to apologize. I didn't know things would go this far. Miranda told me you were struggling and I thought I was helping. I never meant to hurt you. I'm so sorry. Helen. I stared at the email for a long time. Then I closed it and I didn't reply. Some apologies don't deserve a response. By December, the house felt different. Not empty, just quieter. Peaceful even. The kind of quiet I'd fought for, the kind I'd earned. 3 months had passed since that September afternoon when 40 people crowded into my living room and watched my daughter try to steal my life. 3 months since Andrew laid out the evidence, since Miranda signed the withdrawal form, since she walked out my door and didn't look back. I was 63 years old, a widow, and for the first time in months, I could breathe. The estate was intact, $780,000. The house on Settlers Road. The life insurance Thomas left me. The savings we'd built together over 37 years. It was mine, all of it, and I intended to protect it. But protecting it wasn't enough. I wanted to do something with it. Something Thomas would have been proud of. So I started showing up. Every Tuesday afternoon, I joined a group at the Mount Pleasant Library, a support circle for widowed women. There were 8 of us ranging in age from 52 to 81. We met in a small room on the second floor, drank lukewarm coffee from styrofoam cups, and talked about grief, loneliness, and the strange new shape of life after loss. The first time I shared my story, I didn't use Miranda's name. I just said I'd had a family member who tried to take control of my finances after my husband died. I told them about the fake doctor, the conservatorship petition, the recordings, the codicil. The room went silent. Then a woman named Carol 74, sharp as a tack, said, "My son tried the same thing, told me I couldn't manage my own checkbook, wanted me to sign over power of attorney." Another woman nodded. My daughter kept asking about my will, every visit, like she was counting down the days. It turned out I wasn't alone, not even close, so I did something about it. By mid-December, I was teaching a small class at the library, Financial Literacy for Seniors. 6 women showed up the first week, 12 the second. We covered estate planning, how to recognize financial abuse, the legal rights of elderly individuals, and how to protect assets from manipulative family members. I used my background as an accountant. I broke it down step by step: how to check if someone's really a licensed doctor, how to secure your documents, how to record conversations legally in South Carolina, how to know when you need a lawyer. They listened. They took notes. They asked questions. And when they left, they looked a little less scared. Dorothy came by every Thursday. Margaret called twice a week. Frank Coleman. Thomas's witness, the man who'd stood up for me in that room full of people, introduced me to a nonprofit that worked on elder rights advocacy. They wanted me to speak at their next event. I said yes. Andrew sent me an update in early December. Helen Patterson, the fake doctor, was being investigated by the South Carolina Board of Nursing for practicing medicine without a license. She could lose her RN credentials, maybe more. I felt no satisfaction in that, just relief. Miranda sent a letter. It arrived on a Thursday in a pale blue envelope with her handwriting on the front. She said she was sorry. She said she hoped that someday we could talk. I didn't respond. Not yet. Maybe not ever. Some wounds need time. Some need more than that. But I kept the letter. I didn't throw it away. The house was still mine. The money was still mine. My life was still mine. On the last Saturday in December, I sat on the back porch with a mug of tea, watching the winter light filter through the trees. I thought about Thomas, about the codicil he'd written, the protection he'd built for me, even when he wasn't here to see it through. And I realized something. He'd protected me. But in the end, I had protected myself. By March, I wasn't just surviving. I was living. 6 months had passed since that September afternoon when Miranda tried to take everything from me. 6 months since I gave her 2 choices. 6 months since she signed the withdrawal form and left. I was 64 years old, and I wasn't the same woman I'd been when Thomas died. I was Mary Ann Foster, a survivor, a fighter, and an educator. The financial literacy for seniors class I'd started in December had grown beyond anything I'd imagined. What began with 6 women in a cramped library meeting room had expanded to 25 attendees every Tuesday afternoon. We'd moved to the larger community room downstairs. I'd printed handouts, created resource lists, taught them how to check medical licenses online, how to spot financial abuse, how to protect their assets. And they listened. They asked questions. They brought friends. One woman, 72, widowed for 3 years, told me she'd confronted her son after he tried to pressure her into signing over her house. She'd recorded the conversation just like I taught her. He backed off immediately. Another woman thanked me in tears. She said I'd saved her life. I didn't know if that was true, but I knew I was doing something that mattered. In early March, I was invited to speak at the Charleston Conference on Elder Rights, a 2-day event hosted by a statewide advocacy group. Frank Coleman had recommended me. I stood on a stage in front of 200 people and told my story. I didn't use Miranda's name. I told them about the fake doctor, the forged medical report, the conservatorship petition, the recordings, the codicil that saved my estate. I told them about the moment I realized my own daughter saw me as an obstacle, not a person, and I told them how I fought back. When I finished, the room erupted in applause. People stood. A woman from a nonprofit asked if I'd join their board. A reporter from the Post and Courier asked for an interview. I said yes to both. That night in my hotel room, I opened my laptop and started writing. Not notes, a book. Protecting Yourself, a Guide to Financial and Legal Safety for Seniors. Andrew agreed to help with the legal sections. Dorothy offered to proofread. Margaret said she'd design the cover. I was going to finish it by summer. The first chapter would be titled, When Family Becomes the Threat. Dorothy, Margaret, and I had become inseparable. We met for coffee every Thursday. We went to book club together. In late March, we took a weekend trip to Savannah, Georgia. We walked through Forsyth Park, ate shrimp and grits on River Street, and stayed up late talking about everything except grief. It felt like the beginning of something new. Miranda sent 2 more letters, one in January, one in February. I read them both. I didn't respond. She said she was sorry. She said she'd been scared and desperate. She said she missed me. She said she hoped that one day I could forgive her. Maybe someday I would, but not yet. Forgiveness wasn't something I owed her. It was something I had to choose, and I wasn't ready. I wasn't angry anymore. I wasn't afraid. I just wasn't ready. In mid-March, I made a decision. I set aside $50,000 from the estate and used it to establish a small fund, the Thomas Foster Memorial Fund. Its purpose to provide legal and financial assistance to elderly women facing financial abuse from family members. Andrew helped me set it up. Dorothy cried when I told her. Margaret said Thomas would have been proud. I thought so too. The fund wouldn't change the world, but it might change a few lives, and that was enough. One evening in late March, I sat in Thomas's office, the room where I'd found the codicil, the room where Miranda had once searched for leverage. I opened my laptop, pulled up the manuscript, and started typing. Chapter 1. When Family Becomes the Threat. The cursor blinked on the screen, and I began to write. A year had passed since that September afternoon when 40 people gathered in my living room and watched me reclaim my life. I was 65 years old now, and I wasn't just a widow anymore. I was a voice for people who couldn't protect themselves. The book was finished, Protecting Yourself. A Guide to Financial and Legal Safety for Seniors had been published by a small South Carolina press in June. It wasn't a bestseller, but it had reached hundreds of people. I'd received emails from women in their 70s, their 80s, even their 90s, thanking me for telling the truth. One woman wrote, "Your chapter about recognizing financial abuse from family members made me realize I wasn't imagining things. You gave me the courage to say no to my son." That was enough. The Thomas Foster Memorial Fund had grown beyond what I'd imagined. 12 elderly women had received legal and financial assistance to escape abusive situations. 12 lives changed. 12 families held accountable. The financial literacy class had expanded to 40 attendees every Tuesday. I'd been invited to teach at 3 other libraries across the Charleston area. Dorothy and Margaret came to every session. They handed out flyers. They brought snacks. They believed in what I was doing. Frank Coleman had become an advisor for the fund. Andrew was still my lawyer, and more importantly, a good friend. And then in late August, I received an email from Miranda. It wasn't like the others. This time she didn't just apologize. She wrote that she'd been seeing a therapist for 6 months. She was trying to understand why she'd done what she did. She wrote, "You don't have to forgive me, Mom, but I want you to know I'm trying to become a better person." I read it 3 times. And then for the first time in a year, I replied. I wrote, "I don't know if we can go back to what we were, but I hope you find your way forward. And if someday you're ready, we can talk." I didn't know what the future held for Miranda and me. Maybe we'd rebuild something. Maybe we wouldn't. But I knew I'd done the right thing. Dorothy and Margaret were still my closest friends. Frank still checked in every week. Andrew still called to see how I was doing. I wasn't alone. I never had been. On a quiet September afternoon, I sat on the back porch with a cup of tea in my hands, looking out at the garden Thomas and I had planted together years ago. The hydrangeas were blooming. The oak tree stood tall and steady. I thought about the journey I'd taken from grieving widow to threatened woman to fighter to survivor with a purpose. I thought about the codicil Thomas had written to protect me, about the recordings I'd made, about the moment I stood in front of 40 people and refused to be silenced. I thought about the women I'd helped the fund that bore his name, the book I'd written, the life I'd rebuilt. I smiled. Thomas had protected me. But in the end, I had protected myself. And that was what mattered most. Looking back at my journey, I realized that family drama stories like mine aren't rare. These family drama stories happen every day to elderly women who trust the wrong people. My story is just one of countless family drama stories where love became manipulation. And yes, grandma stories like this one, where grandma stories involve financial abuse and betrayal, are more common than we think. Too many grandma stories end badly because no one speaks up. Here's what I learned. Trust your instincts, protect your assets, know your rights, never assume family means safety, document everything, seek legal advice, and remember you don't owe anyone access to your life, your money, or your dignity, not even your own children. Don't be like I was in the beginning, silent, scared, waiting for rescue. Save yourself. God gave me the strength to fight back when I thought I had none left, and He'll do the same for you. If you've experienced financial abuse or know someone facing it, share this story. Share the resources. Be the voice someone needs. If you enjoyed this, please like, subscribe, and share. Your support helps others find help. Final note. This story contains dramatized elements for educational purposes. Some details are fictionalized, but the lessons and message are entirely real. If this style isn't for you, that's okay. Please seek content that better fits your needs.